The purpose of our discussion is to help you better get prime buying motives, which will enable you to sell more LMI programs. When you know what a prime or dominant buying motive is, it's far easier to get it. And when you're effective in eliciting from your prospect these prime buying motives, your closing average will soar, you'll eliminate the majority of stalls and objections, and you'll close many more sales. Getting these prime buying motives is a simple and easily understood process. The process involves using a simple structure and asking easy-to-identify questions that lead your prospect to identify for themselves the specific, emotional, and logical benefits they will receive as a result of becoming your clients. And frequently, asking these questions will lead your prospects to establish in their minds the specific value they estimate that they will receive as well. Can you see how, when you're able to get your prospects to identify for themselves these two things, number one, their specific emotional and logical benefits, and number two, their estimate of value that far outweighs the initial investment, closing the sale becomes a natural and simple process. This tape is divided into three parts. Part number one, what a prime buying motive is. In other words, how to define it. Part number two, a description of a model called the sales ladder that you can learn to use to get the prime buying motives. And part number three, an in-depth session illustrating the entire process. This session was recorded live in one of LMI's major events. Part 1. A definition of a prime buying motive. A prime buying motive can be defined as a specific, measurable, and photographable result with three qualifiers. Number 1. A result you get your prospect through effective questioning to tell you he or she is emotionally committed to getting. Number 2. A result you get your prospect to tell you he or she is committed to take action to get. And number 3, a result you get your prospect to tell you is worth the investment of time, effort, money, or personnel to get. Let me repeat that. A prime buying motive is a specific, measurable, and photographable result with three qualifiers. Number 1, a result you get your prospect through effective questioning to tell you he or she is emotionally committed to getting. Number 2, a result you'll get your prospect to tell you he or she is committed to take action to get. And number 3, a result you get your prospect to tell you is worth the investment of time, effort, and money or personnel to get. People frequently ask, why do you say the result should be specific, measurable, and photographable? What do you mean by that? Now let's assume Steven Spielberg asked you as scriptwriter to interview an Iowa farm couple who said they've taken a trip into space with extraterrestrials. There are several ways that you could approach this. You could sit down with the farm couple and they could tell you, somebody knocked at our door, we opened it, they took us into the field where we climbed into their machine, we took off and landed. They let us out and they left. The description is too general to know much about what happened. You don't have enough information to write an accurate script. You would have to fictionalize. You have no measurements. You have no description of the people on the craft. You have no description of the actions. You have more questions than answers. You'd say, well, what did the people look like? How many fingers did they have? How tall were they? Then you'd get out into the field and you'd say, now where did it land? About how big was it? Did it leave any marks on the ground? How did they take you into it? What was the entrance like? When you got inside, what did it look like? What did the equipment look like? What did they do? How did they communicate? You'd ask many questions to get a specific, measurable, photographable picture that you as a scriptwriter could use. That's the same thing you want to do with the prime buying motive. At each step in your questioning, you want to get that prospect to describe in specific, measurable, and photographable detail what's being talked about. You know that when you have a clear picture of what's being talked about, as a result of the words coming out of the prospect's mouth, the prospect has a clear picture. And it is essential, if you want to close easily, that this be the case. Part 2, the sales ladder. This is the model you can use to help you get the prime buying motive. On a piece of paper or a 3x5 card, draw a ladder with 3 rungs long enough to write several words on each rung. To the left of the bottom rung, label it number 1. To the left of the middle rung, label it number 2. To the left of the top rung, number 3. On the bottom rung, write the words degree of success. On rung number 2, write the word result. On rung number 3, write the word action. Now to the right of rung number 3, write 3 synonyms for action. The 3 words are behavior, cause, and the word what. You may have heard of the 8 whats and 3 whys. This is the what you are doing or going to do. To the right of rung number 2, write the words result, effect, and why. Why stands for why you do what on rung number 3. When you put this on a 3x5 card and carry it with you, you can refer to it easily just before the sales presentation to help keep you on track. Now look at the ladder. Would you agree that the degree of success of any organization, and for our purposes we'll describe an organization as a group of 2 or more individuals with a common purpose, that the degree of success of an organization is the direct product of the results of individuals? Organizations don't get results, individuals get results. And the collective results of these individuals represent the degree of success of an organization. The key words are direct product. Would you also agree that the results an individual gets are the direct product of his behavior? What he does, how he acts. In other words, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. Now let's review. The degree of success of any organization is the direct product of the results of the individuals in the organization. And the results of each individual in the organization are the direct product of their behaviors or actions. The purpose of this ladder is to provide a structure you can remember to help you ask the right questions during the probing and qualifying portion of your sales presentation. The structure will guide you to ask the questions in the logical order that will lead to the prospect identifying their own reasons to buy and help develop their desire to do so. Walk up the right side of the ladder, the bad side, first asking questions dealing with the less than satisfactory results. Next, ask questions dealing with less than satisfactory behavior or actions. Reverse on the top rung, as you will be taught, and walk down the left side, the good side, to rung number 2. Ask questions to identify the good results, the prime buying motives. Make sure to qualify the prime buying motives on 3 important areas. Number 1, desire. Number 2, action. Number 3, value. Now part 3, recorded live.
Let's take a cosmic view of this sales presentation, then we're going to narrow down on one area of it. What's the first part in the sales path? Build rapport, right? All right. Then the second area, really the first block in the sales presentation, is a statement of purpose, right? Why you're there. Who you are and why you're there. Then the second block is what? Building credibility, right? Credibility. Then the third block is probing and qualifying, right? Then what happens after probing and qualifying? We discuss the resources and the methods, right? Resources and methods. Okay? And then what do? Then the last is closing, right? What we're going to be talking about next is going to be limited to the probing and qualifying section and actually the bottom portion of it. Because when you give that sales presentation, the first portion of your probing and qualifying, which is setting you up to find the prime buying motive, the reason or the thing that a person is going to buy, start out by asking easy to answer questions. You want to create an environment of trust. First of all, you're going to find out all of the things about the company that are easy, how long that the owner has been with the company. And you're going to qualify who reports directly to him, what the decision-making flow is. All of these things that are very easy for him to answer, that are non-threatening. Don't allow that prospect to be vague. Because if it's vague to you, it can very possibly be vague to him And the most important reason for asking questions is that you want him to have a clear picture. Because when you get down to the prime buying motive, and he has a very clear picture, or she, of what he or she is going to buy, and has established a value for it, it's easy. It's easy. The sale is already made. All right, so you see what the first part is. In the probing and qualifying, you find out all about the company, what it is they produce. And I used to like to wrap up that first segment of the probing and qualifying by asking a question which is going to help teach that individual, without his or her knowing it, how to get specific, measurable, and photographable. When I talk about getting it specific, measurable, and photographable, you probably are going to know what the company makes. But so far as understanding the organizational structure, how many employees there are, how many are in sales, how many are in administration, how many are in manufacturing, those things you're probably not going to know. So you want to get a clear picture before you proceed. You either have done your homework before, or you get it right now from the boss, so that you want the boss to know, wow, this person is really thorough. I can see that they really understand what my business is all about. Now, as I say, when you get that kind of very clear in your mind, you have a good clear picture, then you can ask a question where you begin to teach them how to get specific, measurable, and photographable. Let's say that Bill Cheney has a company that sells telephones to offices. And Bill Cheney has Cheney Industries, which sells all sorts of office telephones that interface with Ma Bell. So I say, Bill, what quality do you try to have all of your people express that accounts for the degree of success that you have achieved thus far in your business? Now, do you notice that that is a non-judgmental question? What that accounts for the degree of success? If they're doing poorly, it's an appropriate question. If they're doing stupendously, it's an appropriate question. So Bill tells me, Spence, we try to be more customer-oriented. Now, is that specific, measurable, and photographable? No.
No.
All right. So I said to Bill, I say, Bill, that's wonderful. Tell me, how do you try to do that? Bill says, Spence, we do more things for our customers than our competition does. Is that specific, measurable, and photographable? All right. I say, that's great, Bill. Can you share with me some of the things that you do? He says, well, for instance, we install 15 extra feet with every telephone that we put in, so that if they move their desks around, they don't have to call us back for an expensive redo. Is that specific and measurable and photographable? All right. We've got him, we've bracketed and focused down to something specific, measurable, and photographable. Now I'm going to say, what else do you do? And Bill says, well, Spence, what we do, in addition to that, we have all of the women who answer the phones for service calls. They each have a checklist of questions that they ask in order to determine as near as possible what the problem is, what equipment might be needed for the repairs. So that when we go out on a service call, we can have most all of the equipment that we probably will need, so we will not need to bill our clients additional time to come back to the warehouse and get it. Is that specific, measurable, and photographable? Yes. You could photograph the checklist. You could take a video of a person asking those questions and writing down what might be needed. Now we've taught him in 2 instances how to get specific, measurable, and photographable, and at the same time build rapport, because we are getting the prospect to brag about his business and why he is as good as he is, even if it's lousy. Make sense? Okay. Now that we have got there, we are ready to begin to find the prime buying motive. Now, some of you will close gates at this point to make sure that you're talking to the person who can write the check. You may also close gates at this point to make sure that if you do get involved in business together, that there's no major obstacle to beginning in the next few weeks or whenever your next program starts. Because this is the part where if you give this portion of your presentation, if you draw out all of those prime buying motives and then you find out that you're talking to the wrong person, or this person has to bring in somebody else in order to confer with, or they can't get involved with you for another 6 months, you have spilled your popcorn in the lobby. And if you spill your popcorn in the lobby, you won't have it for the show. And if it's going to be another 6 months before you could come back in again and try to get the sale, he's going to think he knows all about what it is that you do. There's not going to be any more popcorn, so you have less likelihood of getting back in and getting his interest and getting his enthusiasm and getting his commitment to do business with you. Does that make sense? This is called the sales ladder. On the bottom rung, number 1, we're going to label it degree of success. On rung number 2, we're going to name it results. On rung number 3, we're going to name it behavior. Now we're going to add some synonyms. For behavior and results, we're going to write action and benefit. Another set of synonyms, cause and effect. Another set of synonyms, what and why. In the sales presentation, the ETM sales presentation, it talks about the 8 whats and the 3 whys. Now folks, this rung 2 is the prime buying motive, the dominant buying motive rung. And we're going to teach you now how to climb up and down this ladder in a very simple manner in order to make sure that you get the prime buying motive. And when you've got this prime buying motive, as we have defined it, you almost assuredly have a sale. No ifs, ands, or buts. Is Rob O'Donnell in the room? I went out to see Rob O'Donnell in Youngstown, Ohio. How many of you know about how depressed Youngstown is? You know the steel mills used to be there, right? Rob set up 4 appointments, 3 on Wednesday afternoon and 1 on Thursday morning. We went out together, and he did the introduction, and I did the probing and qualifying. We were in a training situation. And we closed all 4 of those sales, bing, 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 for how many units was it? 7 units, without missing a single one. And what I'm going to show you now is all that we did. Is that right, Rob? Say yes. And this is all that you do. It is simple. Each of you can go out this next week, use this little ladder, even if you put it on a 3x5 card like Tim Smith did, and just use it to keep yourself on track. No matter what program you're selling, there are certain areas of benefit that are specific to that program. Are we in agreement on that? All right. Now, in the DPL, they list 5 or 6 areas of benefit in the U Incorporated, right? In the ETM, personal organization, increased personal productivity, development of your staff, and improved communications. There are 4 areas. So I'm going to use the ETM as the example of how we're going to climb up and down this ladder to get the prime buying motive. As soon as you have closed the gates, you know you're talking to the right person, and you know that there's no obstacle to working together, you start in, Bill, in what area of your business? He's just described to me, as you will recall, we talked about the telephones, and I have concluded by saying, well, I can certainly see, Bill, why if I were in the market for telephones, I would like to do business with you. We close on a very positive and warm note on that top portion of the probing and qualifying. And now I say, in your business, in what area would you like to achieve an even greater degree of success? I pause slightly and I say, Bill, there are 4 basic areas that all company owners struggle with. Number 1 is personal organization. This means that you're on top of everything that directly affects the profits of your company. Number 2, personal productivity. This means that you get done on a daily basis everything that directly affects the profitability of your company. Number 3 is developing your people to do the same things so that they free you to focus on even more important things. And number 4 is improving your communications so that when you say frog, they jump in the right direction, at the right height, and with the right speed. Now, as you look at those 4 things, personal organization, improved personal productivity, developing your people, and improving your communications, if you had to pick one and only one, Bill, which one would you pick? And so Bill picks, he says, well, Spence, they're all important. And I say, you're absolutely right, Bill. However, for the sake of my illustrating how we're going to help your company to measurably increase its profits, it's essential that we pick one to show you exactly what we can do. So he says to me, personal organization. I have forced him to pick. Now we're going to bracket and focus down, and we're going to use this ladder in order to do it. Let's pause here and talk about the psychology for a second. Is it easier for people to focus on the negative than on the positive as a rule? It's easier for people to say what is wrong than it is what is right. Is that correct? How many times, how many of you in here have gone into a sales presentation and asked people, what would you like to see improved? And they say, oh, we're doing pretty good. Or are they not able to answer? How many say I that have had that experience? I would say that the majority of the people in here. But by golly, you get into any bull session, any gripe session, you get into any gossip session, and what are they going to focus on? What's wrong, right? Once he picks personal organization to ask a simple question, Bill, what results, we've stepped up from rung 1 up to rung 2, the results. What results, Bill, are you currently getting that leads you to pick that area to fine-tune? No matter what he says, you ask that question. What results are you currently getting that leads you to feel that it would be most helpful to perhaps fine-tune in that area? Now he says, look at my desk. I mean, wouldn't you say that the vast majority of the offices that you go into are look pretty disorganized? Now, is that specific, measurable, and photographable, a messy desk? Could you count the number of days in which it was messy when he came to work, that it was messy when he went home, that it was messy all day long? So you've got him specific, measurable, and photographable on that point. Every rung that you walk on, before you go to the next rung, you want to make certain that you have got it specific, measurable, and photographable, because when he's described it to you, you know that he has a clear picture himself. What do you believe causes that? Now we're up to rung 3. It's a behavior question, right? Is that clear? You're simply jumping up to the next rung and saying, what do you believe causes that? And Bill says to me, well, Spence, he said, I am constantly faced with interruptions all day long, plus the fact that I'm just deluged with all of this paperwork that I have to handle. Now, you and I know that usually when people pick a cause for something, it's always somebody else or something else that's the cause, right? Is that correct? All right. Now, we know as students of our ETL that the only reason that a person is going to get into an ETM, or the main reason, is that he's going to start out by changing whose behavior? His own behavior. But we're not going to argue with him about that. But we have to be absolutely clear about what's in that program that we're selling. Example, if you're not clear, this is what I suggest that you do when you get home this next week. Take that ETM or whatever program that you're specializing in, make out a sheet of notebook paper with each lesson number on it, 1 through whatever, draw a line down the center of it. On the left-hand side of the line, write behavior. On the right-hand side of that top of that T, write results. And go through that lesson with a fine-tooth pencil and write down every behavior that you could possibly internalize if you were to work on that particular lesson. So you go through lesson by lesson and you write down every possible behavior. Then on the other side, be imaginative. Write down every possible consequence or result that could come from internalizing that particular behavior. And where appropriate, put a dollar value on it. Now you probably can guess that probably the average executive or owner that goes through a program is going to earn somewhere around $40,000 a year. So that'd be $20 an hour. Now, just in the example of blocking out 1 hour of uninterrupted time as an example of what we're talking about here, the American Management Association has determined that the average manager throughout the United States, or owner, or whoever it is that manages people, is interrupted an average of 8 times an hour. They have also determined that a manager in 1 hour of uninterrupted time can accomplish the equivalent of 3 to 4 hours that would take him if he were being interrupted regularly, periodically. So you know that by putting into practice that one behavior of blocking out uninterrupted time, let's say 1 hour a day, that he's going to accomplish 3 to 4 hours. So let's be very conservative, as we always are in our presentations. And we're going to know that he's going to at least accomplish $20, probably be 40, but let's be very, very conservative here. Times 5 days a week is $100 a week. Let's give him 2 weeks off in the year. That's $5,000 a year. And for an investment of how much money? Approximately $500. So we have here, all of a sudden, just for learning that one behavior, we have a return on investment of 10 to 1. Now, how many of you would be willing to invest $500 if you knew that you were going to get a return on investment of 10 times that? Is the stock market ever that good? I have a ring here. It's got a half-carat diamond in it. I'll sell that to you for $500. If you knew that that thing was worth wholesale 3 times or 4 times that amount, and on retail it was worth 10 times, how many people in here would find a way this afternoon to buy this ring from me for $250? Let's raise the hands of the people that are willing to buy that. All right? Okay? That's what, you see, almost everybody in the room would work to find a way this afternoon to borrow, to write a check, to put it on a credit card or something to get that ring. All right? Now that's what you're going to be doing in finding the prime buying motive if you do it right. You're going to establish a value. We've got just one little behavior here that we've been talking about. Okay, let's go back to our ladder down. We started out on the bottom rung. We asked to pick an area, in what area would Bill like to achieve an even greater degree of success? He says personal organization. We say, what is the effect? What is the result that you're currently getting that leads you to pick that area? He says, look at my desk. I say, what do you think causes that? He says, I am flooded with paperwork. And I can look at his desk. And I don't have to ask him the question how many, because he's got 2 6-inch piles of stuff. Is that specific, measurable, and photographable? All right. Now, from my knowledge of that ETM, I know that in lesson 4, that we're going to teach him actions that he can take in order to master paper flow. So I say to Bill, Bill, now follow what I'm doing here. Bill says, I'm deluged with paperwork. I say, Bill, what I hear you saying is that it would be extremely valuable for you to learn actions that you can take in order to master this paper flow so that it doesn't deluge you. Is that what you're telling me, Bill? I have taken the negative behavior or the negative cause, and I have, from my knowledge of that ETM, turned it around 180 degrees. I have fed him back the correct behavior. The behavior that will solve the problem. And I asked Bill, is that what you're telling me? Now, if he says no, then I can probe some more in order to get him to clarify the picture. And finally, I am able to feed back to him and get his commitment. Yes, Spence, that's what I'm telling you. Now, at that point, I'm able to walk. What we've done is walked up the bad side. We have reversed it 180 degrees. And we're talking now about the good behavior. Now I'm going to say to Bill, Bill, when you have mastered that, what will the result be? Now he says, well, obviously, I'm not going to be deluged with paperwork. Is that specific, measurable, and photographable? No. Let's say we stick another thing in here. I say to him, Bill, what I also hear is that it's going to be extremely valuable for you to learn actions that will enable you to diminish dramatically the number of interruptions that you're faced with on a daily basis to solve that problem. Is that what you're telling me? He says, boy, that's it. So I say, so now I'm down here on this rung on results, and I say, Bill, when you have mastered that, what will be the result? He said, well, I'll certainly get a lot more done. Is that specific and measurable and photographable? No. So I've got to stay there until I get him to tell me what the result is. I've got to help him to tell me. I say, what are you going to get done that you're not getting done? And Bill says to me, well, Spence, I have to take work home with me every evening. All right, we're getting a little bit, we're bracketing and focusing a little bit more specific, right? I say, well, how much work do you have to take home, Bill? I'm being very empathetic. Now, this is very important, that when you're doing this probing, you've got to be using your heart. You have to be the counselor. Not that you're trying to point a finger and show him how bad he is, but like you've got his arm around him. And you're helping him to understand what the problem is and how you're going to help him to solve it. That whole be of service attitude, that whole physician attitude, that whole lawyer or accountant attitude. If we're going to help you solve your financial problems, your legal problems, we're going to help you solve your behavior problems. Okay? So you have your arm around him, and I say, Bill, tell me a little bit about that. Do you work quite a bit at night? He says, yeah. He said, I generally work from 7 until 9 o'clock most every evening. All right, now, is that specific, measurable, and photographable? Could you go and take a picture of him with a clock at 7 o'clock, sitting down, working, getting up? And he says, I say, tell me about that. What would you rather do? He says, Spence, how many of you, I'm going to interrupt here a second, how many of you have sat down with a business owner and about 10, 15 minutes into the conversation, they start pouring their heart out to you? Look at that. Look at that. Business people are among the loneliest people in the world. They don't have anybody's shoulder to cry on. And if you go in there with a compassionate approach, they're going to open up to you. And you can easily get them specific, measurable, and photographable. And so Bill says to me, my wife is always asking me, I'm not even watching the children grow up, she says. I never play with them. I get up from my desk, I go and kiss them goodnight, and I come back to my desk. She says, I never take her out to dinner. Okay. I think, by golly, I've got a prime buying motive here. But now I'm going to apply the three-way test. What are they? Commitment to desire, commitment to action, and establishment of value or investment of resources, right? So I'm going to say to Bill, I say, Bill, is this something? Spending that time with your children, taking your wife out once in a while, is that something that you really, really want, Bill? Are you really willing to take action to see that you can do that? And Bill says yes. I say, Bill, would that be worth $500 to you? He says, you better believe it. Now, I'm not blowing smoke, folks. It's as easy as that if you'll do it. You can go through. I'm going to give you 3 more examples of prime buying motives. I'm talking to Bill. Let's talk about his number 2 person, his controller, who's his right-hand man. And I say to Bill, he had identified in our initial portion of our probing and qualifying that here was a person that he wanted to work with as a possible candidate for the class. I say, now, let's talk about Tom, your controller here. What area would you like for him? It would be valuable for him to fine-tune in. He says, I'd like to develop him to take on more responsibility. So we walk up and down that ladder and we find out that Bill, that he has been one of these frequent entrepreneurs that can't let go of the reins. And so he tries to do everything himself. And we find out that his wife has been after him for 5 years to take a vacation. They haven't had a single week's vacation in 5 years. And by establishing a strategy for doing that, he'd be able to take his wife on a vacation. And then we talk about Chris here, his vice president of sales. Let's talk about Chris. So we find out that Chris needs to learn to delegate more effectively. That Chris fiddles around constantly with the sales reports. And what would Bill rather have Chris do? Rather have her out in the field 2 days a week working with the regional salespeople. Why? Because Bill says, damn it, he said, when I was out in the field, I used to have 4 or 5 appointments every day. And those salespeople, they averaged 3. So I say to him, well, Bill, maybe they won't do 5 appointments a day, but would it be reasonable for them to do 4 appointments a day? He says, it certainly would. And you feel that if Chris were to spend that time in the field instead of fiddling with sales reports, that would be easy to accomplish? Absolutely. Well, let's say, Bill, that we have her out there helping them with their goals, and they get 4 appointments a day instead of 3. What's that going to do for your cash flow down the road? He says, well, in 6 months, that would be a definite increase, about 30% in our net cash flow and, of course, our profits. And I say, now, would that be somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 or $50,000 and $100,000 extra in profits a year? That would be over $100,000 a year in net profits. Now, I'm going to look at Bill at this point. Is that specific, measurable, and photographable a result? All right? I'm going to look at Bill, and I'm going to say, Bill, are you really committed to see that that happens? Are you willing to take action and put Chris in the program in order to see that that happens? Now, I'm not going to ask him the dumb question, would that be worth $500 to you? I mean, obviously, we've already established the value, right? Okay. So now I've got 3 strong prime buying motives that are specific, measurable, and photographable. Watching his children grow up and taking his wife out to dinner, going on a vacation, and increasing the company profits by $100,000 a year, or suppose it was only $20,000 a year. Doesn't make any difference. What do you do now? I've got his commitment. I've nailed them down. First, I identified them climbing up and down the ladder. When we got back down to the good results, we applied the three-way test. Is that something that you want? Is that something that you're willing to take action to get? Is that something that would be worth $500 or investment of your person's time, effort, money, or personnel? He says, yes, yes, yes. What do I do? I have already sold 3 people into the program, and I know it. It's simply a matter not of hard closing, but of wrapping up the details. I feed back those things. Well, Bill, let me see if I've got this straight. Number 1, you want to be doing this, and when you do that, this will be the result. Number 2, you want Tom to be doing this, and this will be the result. And number 3, you want Chris to develop in this area, and when she does that, this is going to be the result. Tell me, Bill, how soon would you like to have those results? And what do they usually say? Tomorrow or yesterday. That's the most frequent answer that I got when I was in the field. And at that point, all you have to do is chuckle and say, you know, many of our clients believe we're magicians. We may not be able to do it quite that quickly, but we can certainly begin on April 29th. Is that soon enough? And he says, well, yes, I guess so. And I'm writing the 3 names down on my order pad, and I say, fine, who do I see to get the registration fee? Now let's summarize what we've been talking about here. To find the prime buying motive, you start out with a simple ladder. You find out in what area. You have several areas that you picked out that your program gets results in. And then you immediately ask them in what area they'd like to achieve an even greater degree of success, and then you offer them the ones that you're able to get results in. And you guide them to pick one of those areas. It doesn't make any difference what one. From your intimate knowledge of the program, no matter what they pick, you know hundreds of solutions. But you have to get them to see very clearly in their mind what their problem is, what the solution is, and how valuable it is. So you walk up the ladder. You ask them to pick. You say, after they pick that, what results, rung number 2, are you currently getting that leads you to pick that area? Another reason is simply why. Now, see, all of these words can be used appropriately. Why do you pick that area? Describe to me, tell me, why do you say that? And get them to describe the results that they're getting. And get them specific, measurable, and photographable. Once you get them specific, measurable, and photographable, you jump up to rung 3 on your sales ladder. And you say, what do you believe causes that? What is the action that's taken that leads to this result? What is it? What is it that they do? What's the cause? What's the action? They're going to generally describe some cause apart from themselves. You know good and well that it can be fixed internally, but you don't want to anger them. You don't want to get in an argument, so you leave that alone. But as soon as they tell you what the cause is, then from your intimate knowledge in the program, you talk about the counteraction. The perfect behavior, the good behavior, the ideal behavior that will solve that problem. And I feed that back to Bill and I say, Bill, what I hear you saying is that it would be extremely valuable for you to learn and get on the same wavelength with Chris so that she understands and acts on your priorities, which is to spend time in the field with the salespeople. Is that what you're telling me? He's just described that she doesn't do this. And he says, yes, that's what I'm telling you. And I say, now when she does that, I'm asking him to take mental possession of the correct behavior and identify the results that will come from that correct behavior. When she does that, Bill, what will the result be? And she says, well, when Chris spends this time out in the field with those people, they're going to increase their appointments. And now I'm going to get it specific, measurable, and photographable. I'm going to say, well, how many appointments do they get now? What would be realistic? Why do you say that? I want to make sure that it's very conservative in what we're talking about. Like if he says, well, I always had 5 or 6 appointments, and they're getting only 3, I might say to him, you know, perhaps that's why you're president of the company now, and you're as successful as you are, but perhaps they won't have quite that drive. But would it be reasonable that they would increase their number of appointments from 3 up to 4? He says, oh, without a doubt. I've sometimes said, you know, all of my clients are built based on under-promising and over-delivering. So let's be very conservative here in the results that we're talking about. Now, when they do that, what will be the cash flow increase that you would expect? What would be the additional profit that you expect? Over what period of time? Get him to figure and compute it. Don't you try to do it. Have him do it. Because when he does it, he's going through that mental process where he is establishing the value. So that when you come back and summarize those things, it's going to look like that $500 is a nickel for this ring. Make sense? All right. That's the simple process and the sales ladder of finding the elusive prime buying motive, folks. Go out this next week and practice it. It's simple. Just put it on a little 3x5 card if you need to. But go out and practice walking up down that ladder. It's not going to take you but a half a dozen sales presentations until you've become proficient with that. And you're going to dramatically increase your closing average. I've enjoyed immensely talking with you. Thank you.